I am absolutely thrilled that you took the time and the opportunity to come on by and to listen to another segment. By the way, we have a great segment today by someone who has an absolute amazing story, a powerful story, and I certainly do believe that her story will certainly touch hearts, which in return will change lives. Again, all the way from Ohio, we have with us Miss Sue Bowles. How are you, Sue?
I am doing really well, Will. How are you tonight?
Uh, Wonderful. We're wonderful. Thank you so much. First of all, I just want to say thank you for looking me up, and I'm so glad that we were able to connect and make this a reality.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me on the show and the opportunity just to share my story and hopefully encourage some people along the way.
Absolutely, and there's no doubt in my mind that you will certainly do that. You will certainly do that. Sue, I'd like to start from the beginning because the times that you and I got the opportunity to speak off air, so much of your story was it was just so impactful. There's
Mhm.
several moving parts with your story, so I would love to start from the beginning. Talk with us a little bit about some of the challenges and the mountains that you've had to overcome.
Wow. There have been quite a few mountains. The old song "Climb Every Mountain" seems to describe my life at times.
Wow.
Probably the biggest one that ended up being the foundational issue for anything else that happened in my life
Hmm.
came when I was 7 years old in first grade. I was walking home from school one day, and a classmate named Bobby, and again, it was first grade. I was 7 years old, and he basically enticed me into the woods on the school property. And before I knew it, he was raping me. And
Wow.
it's not something that was thought about at that moment in time. At that
Hmm.
day and age, it was very normal for kids to walk home from school. I lived half a mile, maybe three quarters of a mile from the school,
Hmm.
and it wasn't anything that was ever even thought of. So I didn't have the words to tell anybody what happened. And
Hmm.
the way I describe it is my emotions were frozen in time at that point in time. And it became my 15-year secret. I didn't tell anyone until my senior year of college. And that started, it started the mountain to crumble
Hmm.
in good ways because you want the mountains to get out of your way. And
Ab-
have to get them at the base for them to crumble. And this was my base. So
Absolutely.
that was the biggest thing. And then a lot of stuff piled on top of that.
Let's
My
back
dad
up.
was Go
If
ahead.
I may, let me back you up just a little bit, Sue, because I just want to point out a couple things that it was just kind of stood out at me. So this happened in first grade,
Correct.
and this was by a classmate.
Correct. Yes.
So just so everyone is very clear, how old were you at this time?
7.
And this classmate was roughly around the same age, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And so at the age of 7 or possibly 8, this classmate actually raped you in the woods while you were on your way home from school.
Correct. Yes.
Wow. So, Sue, can you recall the kind of emotions that you might have been feeling during that time? What were you thinking as this innocent little 7-year-old girl with this kind of an act happening to you?
Uh, that is a good question, and I can only conjecture what I was feeling
Okay.
because, as I said, my emotions were frozen in time. And at that point in time, um, that's a hard question to answer. I remember obviously feeling very scared of getting
Hmm.
caught. Um, as
Hmm.
people walked by, he told me to be quiet. Didn't want to get caught. At the end, when my mom came looking for me, um, his last words to me were, "Don't say anything." And he left one direction, I left the other. So there was a lot of fear at that point in time, but there was just a lot of shock. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't have the words, and because it wasn't anything that was discussed at that day and age, and there was no reason to think anything was happening. I didn't know what to tell anybody, and no one knew to ask because it just wasn't on the radar. It's nobody's
Right.
fault. It just wasn't on the radar.
Right. And let me ask you this, your loved ones, your parents, or whomever it might be, did they, from that moment forward, did they ever notice anything a little differently that you could recall about you? Were there any behaviors that you began to exhibit that might have made them to stand at attention? Was there anything different that you can recall? And I know that you were very young, but putting your mind in rewind, is there anything different that you were exhibiting or that you were doing that maybe your parents or loved ones might have picked up on or may have asked you some questions about?
Uh, Probably not because I became really good at wearing a mask. I became really good at hiding what I was thinking and what I was feeling.
Wow.
So I didn't want to give them reason to ask because I was going to get found out. And again, because you're so steeped in fear and shame, you don't want to be found out. So you play the game and you put on the mask. And I got to be very good at it.
Mm, powerful words. Powerful words because so many of us get used to, and you said it very eloquently, playing the game, wearing the mask, even to the point where you become someone else, but it allows you to stay in the game, and no one really recognizes the underlying you, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Wow. So Sue, as time went on, were there any behaviors at any point that you were exhibiting, maybe even at school? Were there was there some challenges with grades, establishing healthy relationships with other people? Were there other things that were beginning to happen? And even though this was your 15-year-old secret, others may not have known what happened, but were there things that you were beginning to take note of that were happening to you?
Yeah, I was a very angry young girl. I became very angry. In fact, I remember someone in grade school writing in my your photo book. And she wrote to the girl who's always mad, and I didn't realize that at that
Mm,
point in time what it was about. And I look back now, and Monica had it nailed. She was so right, and I was angry. I think it was
mm,
the biggest thing because again something had happened, and anytime something like that happens, no matter how much you try to hide it, it's going to find a way to leak out.
yes,
And
it
mine
does.
leaked out. It leaked out through anger. I would have outbursts of anger. I worked at a fast food place, and if something frustrated me, I would go into the walk-in and I was punching cardboard boxes. So I was not healthy in that regards in terms of dealing with my emotions. I think the big thing I saw was anger. That was one of the biggest things. And a lot of insecurity. A lot of insecurity where I felt valued if I was seen. So activities became what I call my number. And
Mm,
um, the more I was seen, therefore I had value because someone noticed me. I mattered at that point in time. Be it from playing basketball in high school, running track at college, doing theater, doing radio, doing whatever. Whatever I could get my hands in, it gave me an identity because I didn't have to deal with myself. I could just become my activities.
mm, mm. And once again, those activities helped you to continue to wear this mask and again to hide. I think that's the key word.
Hmm. Yep, very much so. Very much so.
Academically, was there a decline in grades or anything of that nature?
No, I was actually a really good student.
Okay.
I was a B plus A minus student.
Okay.
I had perfect attendance in high school.
Hmm.
Nothing like that. It became part of the persona of nothing's wrong with Sue. Sue's got it together. Sue's the good girl. Sue's the goody two shoes. That kind of thing.
Hmm.
It all became part of it all. And I liked school.
Okay. Now, Sue, I've got to ask you this question because it's just something that's in my heart, and I was wondering, all of this time as you were transitioning from one grade to the next, this classmate that did this unspeakable act to you in first grade, were you seeing him every day? I'm sure along the way, were you having classes with him, or did you see him walking by in the hallway?
Um, the school I went to in first grade was a public school. And starting in second grade, I started going to a Catholic school. So I didn't
Mm,
see him anytime after that.
okay, okay. And you never even got the opportunity to see him in the community, or maybe it's something in your neighborhood or at all. You
Yeah,
just after
no,
that point, you just never saw him again.
never saw him again.
Wow. Let's fast forward a little bit, Sue, because all of this time you wore this mask, you played the game, and you played it well. And even to the
Hmm.
point where there were others who just didn't even recognize that there was anything going on with Sue. Were there other things as you transitioned to your high school years, getting ready to possibly leave and go to college, that began to happen to you, that once again, because you had become this expert in hiding, something that was taking root, but again, it was hidden out of plain view?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of insecurity. There was a lot of, again, like I said earlier, identity based on my activities,
Hmm.
more so than who I was. I didn't really know who I was. Um, you know, that's probably the best way to describe it. There was a gentleman that I dated off and on throughout high school, and at our 25th reunion, we had a chance to talk, and I apologized to him because I used him for my security to go to dances and again to be seen. And Gary said, I used you too. So it was nice just to be able to have that peace and that closure. Gary was actually going to propose to me the same night that I was going to let him know that my life's going a different direction. So we were definitely on two different pages.
Oh,
Gary
wow.
got married, had a great life. He has since passed on, but I'm really thankful for that we had that chance at our high school reunion, just to be able to sit and talk in retrospect and just apologize and make things right, to deal with, address the insecurities we had, and to realize that each other gave each other that security, even though we didn't know how to describe it at that point in time.
Hmm. Hmm. At what point, Sue, did you start developing, or you were diagnosed with the eating disorder? I'd like to talk a little bit about that because
Sure.
I know at some point, this came up. And around what point in your life were you diagnosed with having this eating disorder? And how did we get to that point?
Well, and before I get into that, let me try to explain a little bit about eating disorders for the listeners that don't have much background in that. There's a lot of
Certainly.
misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation out there about eating disorders.
Hmm.
People think they're about diets gone bad. They think they're about vanity. They think they're about body image. And I can tell you that's really wrong, because an eating disorder is about not dealing with emotions and emotions gone wrong. An eating disorder is an addiction, just like alcoholism or drug addiction. But the main difference, though, is that to be in recovery from those other addictions, you do without. To do without food, you die. So, for an eating disorder person to be in recovery, you have to face that and you have to force yourself to eat. You have to learn how to eat again. So, it's what I call mental health. And it's about, like I said before, it's about emotions that are frozen. My emotions were frozen in time at age 7. The longer you're in the freezer, the thicker the ice gets.
Hmm.
And when in high school it started coming out. I started feeling insecure. And again, when you start off course, the longer you go, the further off center you are. So if this happened to me at 7, by the time I'm 16, my emotions are already frozen in time. Then you throw in being a teenager and hormones and everything else that goes with being a teenager. And my brain just really started getting whacked out. So it started there, but it really took root in college. I went to a small college called Defiance College up in Northwest Ohio. Absolutely love that campus. It's a beautiful college. It's just a fantastic place to be. And at the time I was there, they had one dining hall and set hours for the meals. So if you missed that window, you didn't eat. So I would get there and I would eat. But as the anxiety within me started building, and I didn't know what it was at that point in time, kind of started getting paranoid in my mind. My mind started lying to me. And it would tell me that when I was hungry, if I wanted to go up and get a second serving of food, that I couldn't do that or I shouldn't do that because everybody was looking at me. And everybody would know that Sue had a need. And Sue didn't have any needs because Sue had it all together. So instead, I would dump my tray and get out of Dodge. And I learned to curb my hunger. And over time, it developed into an eating disorder.
Mm. You said a mouthful there, Sue, a mouthful. I want to just kind of go back to something you just said because when you said that, it hit me like a ton of bricks, to be honest with you. You said you learned to curb your appetite
Mm-hmm.
because you realized that, and it was, you knew that if you went back to get a second helping or an initial helping, I guess at some point it really didn't matter. That meant that Sue had a need.
Yep.
And because, and again, I'm going back now, looking at, reflecting on your history that you've shared so eloquently, because Sue was so used to hiding, because Sue was so used to having it together, there's no way you could show this portraiture of you having some needs. I mean, of course, eating and being hungry is
Mm-hmm.
is the most basic human need, but in your mind, this, you can't show anyone that you got any needs, so you would just go without eating.
Yeah, I would go without eating or I would snack. That was my big thing is I snacked so that if I was hungry, I'd have a bag of chips or I'd have some cookies. It ended up always being something high carb so that it quickly gave me that sensation of being full long enough to get me past that situation.
Mm. And the onset of this really took place again when you were in college. And is this when you
Mm-hmm.
first got in college, or a little later on, towards the end? Around what period or season did the onset of this really come on?
Probably about junior year. That's what I would say. That's what I remember most specifically is probably junior year. My junior year of college was really stressful, and as I look back now, I think that probably helped kick it because I had so much going on that year in particular.
Mm. So I'd like to try to bridge these gaps together if I can. So with this eating disorder, I'm assuming that at some point you sought professional help.
Yes,
And so I'm curious, were you seeking professional help because of the eating disorder, or you might not even known at that point when you were seeking help that that's what it was, or were you seeking help at least in your mind from the 15-year-old secret that you had, or do you think it was a combination of both?
well, I think there was an overriding sense that there was something up, that there was something that was, it sounds, lack of a better phrase, eating Sue. No pun intended.
Mm,
There was something there was something
yeah.
that was bugging Sue,
Hmm.
and there was some depression involved and anxiety, but you just couldn't quite get your finger on it. It's like it's there, but I can't figure out what exactly it was. So that's
Hmm.
what kind of led me to the area counseling center up at Defiance. That, and I was talking with my dean of students. He became my confidant over 4 years. He was just fantastic. I credit him with graduating. We'll put it that way.
Wow.
Um, so, but at that point in time, the secret wasn't out. And at that point in time, I hadn't really identified the eating disorder. It was more just emotional stuff that was coming up that we were
Hmm.
trying to figure out, but we really weren't getting too far with it.
Mm, okay. But I'm imagining that once you did begin some level of therapy, that all of these things began to come out, and probably at some point, all of this began to fit together like a nice, neat little puzzle, correct?
Yeah, and honestly, it really didn't start until I would say 2008. The counselor I'm with now is Amanda, and she has been absolutely fantastic. I went through a number of years where it seemed like everything was fine. My eating was fine, things were going fine, nothing was bothering me. And my pastor's wife passed away from stage 4 breast cancer in 2005.
Mm.
3 years later, I was still grieving Mallory as if she just died yesterday. And I just couldn't take it anymore. I was starting to see my eating disorder behaviors come out again. My red flags were going up. And so my pastor had experience with an eating disorder counselor because two of his daughters developed eating disorders after their mom died. So he connected me with Amanda, and I've been with Amanda since. We have done a lot of hard work. And honestly, we joke about how many firsts I've had with her, or she's had with me, I should say. And I really didn't find the healing and the peace I have now until I started working with her. And even
Mhm.
then, it really wasn't until 2014, 6 years into my time with her, before we really started dealing with the rape and dealing with the eating disorder and being able to deal with it, very directly. I've been in recovery from the eating disorder since 2016 when I started working with a dietitian.
Amazing.
So it's been an evolution, but it's been a great one too. Painful, but right.
Right. Let me ask you this, Sue. So, when this 15-year-old secret finally came out, because I am very
Hmm.
curious to know what what stimulated that conversation. Was this during therapy? Was this when you were speaking to some other very close confidant? When did this come out?
It came out my senior year of college, probably a couple months before I graduated. Ed Highland was my dean of students at Defiance. He had become my
Right.
confidant, and he knew going into the spring semester of college that I was not ready to be in the workforce. I was just not mentally ready. So as we talked, he gave me different homework assignments, and then next time we'd meet, we'd
Okay.
go over them. And we were going over one of the homework assignments, and I don't remember what it was. And I talk about it in my book. I don't remember what happened with it, but he asked a question, and I went off on some kind of obscure comment. And I remember the last part saying, well, when society tells you not to say anything, and I just stopped. My voice trailed off, and I was looking at his carpet, and he looked at me, and this is where the pivotal moment in my life came. He said, he looked at me and said, Sue, did your parents hurt you? And I said, no, not them. And he said, somebody else? And I said, yes. He said, what happened? And that's when it came out. I didn't know it wanted to come out at that moment in time. And, and,
Hmm.
and, and one of Ed's comments, later was he wished he had known sooner because it answered a lot of questions he had. Again, going back to trying to figure out what is it about Sue? Something's not up, something's not up, not right. Something's up.
Hmm.
And then it finally started falling together. So that was the first time the secret came out. And then, he encouraged me to tell my counselor at the counseling center in the next session. And Ed went with me. And then I
Oh,
graduated.
wow.
And then that fall, I was in graduate school in Minnesota. And it came up where I shared it with my supervisor, my
Hmm.
graduate school supervisor, because it had come out. And once you start cracking the iceberg, it's going to keep melting.
That's
And
right.
so it was starting to melt. And talked to my graduate school supervisor who connected me with the counselor at the counseling center. So for the 2 years I was in graduate school, I was seeing the counselor up there as well, and that helped.
Wow. Absolutely amazing, Sue. Did you ever share with your parents or your mother, caregiver, what had happened once you cracked that ice, as you just mentioned? Did you ever reach back to your mother and share with her what had happened?
All of my family is now aware. Yes, it took some time because
Hmm.
I had a lot of work to do before I was
Absolutely.
ready to have that conversation. But
Right.
all of my family is aware of the situation now. Yes, they've known for a number of years now.
Brave. And Sue, many people, and I've heard this so often, a lot of folks would say, everyone has a story. But
Hmm.
the difference between the individual that shares that story and others who may have a story is that one uh, moment where you're brave enough to share it.
Yeah,
And it's that one moment when you're brave enough to share it. So I it took some some unbelievable courage on your behalf to share your story. And one of the things that I found so amazing, which is why I was so thrilled to get the opportunity to talk with you, is you're not just uh, hoarding a story, if you will. And let me explain what I mean. You don't have this powerful story that could potentially, and that will certainly change lives for other people, and just tuck it away, and others don't get the benefit of hearing a lot of these giants that you've gone through. You are now taking your life story, and you're literally all over the country with different conferences. You've written a book, and let's talk about this next transitioning phase from the Sue who was, keeping this 15-year-old secret, and having all these different, challenges, and not sharing, to what you are now and how you're actually taking uh, your life's giants, and sharing them with others. Let's talk about that a little bit.
yeah, and thank you. And let me say first of all that what I'm going to share here this is where it happened for me. So, my faith is the most important thing in my life, and
Absolutely.
my faith is what has brought me to this point. And then I got to share a little bit. Um, Behind my shoulder, you'll see a quote on the wall. It says, "It's not going to matter. No, it's not going to matter if you have a few scars. It will matter if you didn't live." And that's a
Mm,
quote from Rich Mullins. Rich was a Christian musician. For those who are familiar with Christian music, his one of his big songs was "Awesome God," and
yes.
He was killed in a car wreck in 1997. In 2014, um, the family, friends, and a movie producer from California wanted to do a movie about Rich's life. So there was a movie that came out called Ragamuffin. I
Hmm.
watched it, and it was a really hard, painful watch for the first part of it. And later in the year, in 2014, the same group of people decided that they were going to do a retreat to continue the conversations about the themes of the movie, about reckless abandon,
Hmm.
masks, family relationships,
Right.
reckless love of God. And there was just a pounding in my heart where I knew I was supposed to go. I was supposed to go to Nashville visit some friends, and I just couldn't get away from it. So I bypassed the Nashville trip and signed on for the retreat. And that first retreat is where the iceberg just chipped away. And there's something about coming together in community where you are loved and accepted for who you are, right where you are, with no pretense. And
Mm.
this group of people have become my tribe. They're my family. They're my friends. Um, we just did a Skype reunion call yesterday and just had the most fun laughing and just having a great time. So I've attended this retreat every year, and it's now called the Walking Stick Retreat. Each year, God continued to build, and I talk about it in my book in more detail. And I had to come to grips with my story. While I knew what had happened, I had never really owned my story. I was still in denial about it. I didn't like my story. I
Mm.
hated my story. And I had to come to grips with the fact that this happened to me. And that has happened through these retreats because you can just get away and God kind of does his work. So I went from having to accept my story and come out of the denial. And then I had to do the hard work of grieving my story. It's one thing just to own up to it, but there's another to say, I lost a whole lot. And it's okay to be mad and grieve and cry about all that. And then from there, I had to realize and accept the fact, the truth, that I'm valuable to God and that I have something to offer. And that's when the whole book thing started. That's when
Yes,
the heart speak started. That's when everything started happening. Is once I realized that I am valuable to God,
absolutely.
because because up to that point in time, I had called myself the holy exception. Everything in the Bible was good enough for everybody but me. I was too far gone. I had screwed up too much. There's no way God could love me or forgive me. And that's the lie I was living under. And once I realized that I matter, I don't matter because of what I do. I
Mm.
matter because of who I am and whose I am. That's when things started happening. Then I started realizing that I have a story to tell, and I have the responsibility to share that story. One of my websites is mystepahead.com, and the whole premise of that is that you only have to be a step ahead to help the person behind you. You don't have to have it all figured out. And I think it's one of the biggest lies that we all believe is that I got to have it figured out and I have to arrive before I can help somebody. And that's not the truth at all. If you have
Mm.
gone through something, even if you're still going through it, you're a step ahead of the person that's just starting the trail. You
Yes,
can
you are.
help them. You can
Yes,
help them. And it's
yes.
our responsibility to reach our hand out and help them while we continue forward.
Oh, Sue, that is so, so true. And it's amazing how many people who really don't feel that way. There are so many people that feel as though that I've had my time of despair, I've had my time of hardships, I've had my time of crying and the long nights of tears. And if you're fortunate enough to be able to maneuver past those giants, instead of you looking at reaching back for those individuals who are coming up on you and reaching back to say, here's my hand, I've been where you are, let me grab and help pull you
Mm-hmm.
along. Many of us, what
Yeah,
happens is we just want to run and we want to put the things that help to develop us into who we are and what we are, leave that far behind us, and that was never, it was never really intended for that to be that way.
right, right. I think, let me read this from the back of my book because it kind of explains everything. It says, when we're
Okay.
talking about our stories, the space between is that gap, that time of questioning and anger and confusion and doubt and whatever else you can think of. It's the gray area of uncertainty, of wondering what the point is. And as we start realizing that good can come from tragedy,
Mm,
that unspeakable horrors that happened to me have now been turned around for good.
yes.
But it took going through the mountain. You cannot get around the mountain of healing. You can go around it and dance around it all you want, but you're just going to chase your tail. You can't get through. You cannot. The only way through is the only way to the other side is to go through it, and it is
Mm,
not for the faint of heart, and it's not something you want to do on your own.
mhm.
But when you get to the other side, I never thought I would be here. This was always something that was just out of reach for me, and now it's my reality. And it's a privilege and an honor to have opportunities like this show where I can share my story and hopefully reach even just one person and
Yes.
just give them be one more voice in their mind to say that you matter, that your life has worth, and that your story is worth telling. That's my message, is that every story is worth telling.
Mm. Absolutely amazing, Sue. Just amazing. You are certainly speaking life, and it's hitting me. I tell you, it's just an amazing attitude that you have as you move forward and do what you feel you've been called to do. What is the name of your book?
Mhm.
What
My
what
book
is
is
the name of
called
your
This
book?
Much I Know, the Space. The book is called This Much I Know, the Space Between.
Okay. And for the listeners who are interested in getting a copy of this book, where can they go to get it?
It is on Amazon and Kindle.
Okay, Amazon and Kindle. All
Mhm.
right, and and what we're also going to do is once this podcast is finished and has loaded, we're going to also put your information there. Sue,
Great.
also talk with me a little bit because I know you're doing quite a bit, but talk with us a little bit about this global summit that you're actually a part of as well, that you're going to be doing.
Yes. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and
It is.
there's an organization that is doing a global mental health summit, which actually is going to be very timely in the wake of all this coronavirus stuff going on.
Absolutely.
And I am one of, I think we have somewhere around 30 speakers, and I'm one of 30 speakers who will be presenting. It's actually everything's videotaped, it's all virtual,
Hmm.
and I'm speaking on the inside life of an eating disorder, and I share in more detail about my eating disorder, about a little bit more about my story, and about what eating disorder recovery is like, and my goal, my purpose, my heart, my passion is to break the stigma around mental health issues, in particular with eating disorders. There is so much misinformation out there. I also volunteer with an online community called Beating Eating Disorders, and it's an international community, so I volunteer with them as well. And it's going to be great. I love it. If people would like the registration link, there's discounted registration in advance. They text next step to 31996. You'll get a message from me, send me your email, and then I will get you the registration link so you can get a discounted rate. And then also, if they send me their email, I also send them 2 chapters of my book as a thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And once again, what we will do is we will post all of that information down under this podcast so everyone will have access to that. Sue, I also want everyone to know that you also have a very busy website. Why don't you give them that address so that they can also keep in contact with you and the different things that you're doing as well?
Yeah, the main website is mystepahead.com. I started it as part of an eating disorder support recovery website. It
Mhm.
has morphed into a mental health support website. I have a number of resources on there, so certainly check those out. And I want to say, if someone is struggling with an eating disorder, on that website, there are a number of links. One in particular is to the National Eating Disorder Association website. They have an online screening tool, and they also have online help available during the work week. You can have chat with them.
Mhm.
They can also, with the screening tool, they can also help connect you with someone in your community. That if you want to look into that a little more and maybe start figuring out, do I have an eating disorder and what's it about? They certainly want to help you with that. But mystepahead.com. My speaker website, because I am a speaker, so every speaker has a website, is suebowles.com. And through there, you can get a hold of me if you're interested in having me speak. I know a lot of in person speaking isn't happening right now, but the virtual world is wonderful. Um, and then I'm also on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, all under My Step Ahead. The other thing I do, I have something I send out via text on Wednesdays called Hump Day Help. Wednesday, by the time Wednesday hits, the tank's running a little dry. So I like to try to give a little bit of a drop of water to kind of help
Yeah,
fill it up a little bit.
a
So
little
again, if they
inspiration.
text little inspiration. So if they text that next step to 31996, they can also join that text list, and I'd be happy to send them a quick little text each Wednesday just to help them along the way.
Fantastic, Sue. Absolutely fantastic. Sue, I want you to take us home. What is it that you want every last one of us, including myself, to walk
Mm.
away with from your message? If you could package your message into this very, very neat little, this neat little container, if you will, to hand deliver it,
Hmm.
what would be inside of that, and what is it that you would want others to take away?
You matter, and your life matters. Don't let anybody or anything lie to you that you don't have worth or that you aren't good enough, because you are. You have a gift, and it might take some work to discover and uncover that gift, but rediscover the wonder of you. Every
Hmm.
person has something wonderful to share. It doesn't have to be on a stage, it doesn't have to be on a podcast. It could be in a relationship and a friendship. But you have a reason for being on this earth, and you matter. That's my message. You matter, your story matters, and your life has worth. Do the hard work if there needs to be some hard work. But the journey to the other side is wonderful. I speak from experience.
Yes.
And it's worth it. When you get to the other side, it's worth it. But you can't do it alone. And if you're not sure where to reach out, or if you feel alone, reach out to me on my websites. My email is right there. I would love to walk alongside you. I would love to help connect you with some resources. I want you to know you are not alone.
Yes. Powerful, powerful, powerful message, Sue, and so impactful. I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart here on the Moving Beyond Life's Giants platform for taking the opportunity to come and to speak with us so profoundly. I got to tell you, you shared your story with power, assurance, and conviction. I
Mm-hmm.
want you to know that.
Thank you.
And
I
we thank
appreciate that.
you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Again, all the way from Dayton, Ohio, ladies and gentlemen. We have the amazing Sue Bowles here who have just shared her amazing life story. She's got a lot of different things she's involved in. She's got quite a few projects she's juggling. She has some websites and some resources. We're going to make sure that we put all of her information at the bottom of this podcast so that you can certainly reach out to her after this podcast is over if you choose, or if you like to follow her on her various social media platforms. We will have all of that information there as well. Again, Sue, thank you so much for being a part of the show. I'd like to thank all of you for again chiming in and looking at the Moving Beyond Life's Giants segment. As I've always stated before, all of our podcasts now are being loaded and saved on our own servers, on our own website. Yes, at www.aboutweeks.com. Once again, www.aboutweeks, ABOUTWEEKS.com. If you feel that you have a story that you would love to share, that you feel is something that the world needs to hear, I would love to hear it. And there are thousands of others who would love to hear your story as well. Certainly drop us an email at mystory@aboutweeks.com. Once again, mystory@aboutweeks.com. Once again, this is Will Weeks with Moving Beyond Life's Giants. Thank you so much for chiming in.